Quiet on set, you damn kids! Who wants to make a short? We'll pay you in IMDb credits and experience. Lights, camera, action, it's I Don't Give a Flick, your favorite film podcast. Oh yeah, Tarantino, Mero, and Spielberg, here's looking at you, kid.
We talk movies and TV shows and sometimes other things we like.
And Nolan's coming right at your fucking face. Every minute of every day will never stop.
We'll talk lenses, music, and Foley. We'll understand the depth of field.
We've got theories so out of this world and epic it'll blow off your fucking tits.
Oh yeah, that was bullshit. Duel to the death.
Duel to the death.
I shall have my revenge on you, Jonny Blackburn.
Oh, Jesus, I didn't mean to bump into you, though.
Oh, but you did.
But you didn't say I couldn't bring a gun to this duel. You just said a duel. It was a vague statement, so
yeah,
you've only got your sword on you.
Oh, dear.
So, the tables have turned.
Oh, how the tables have turned.
God, I'm just going down this list of like younger Latino actors. I don't recognize anybody.
I don't know what to tell you. Oh, what about the guy from Ant-Man?
But that's John Leguizamo's not I wouldn't say he's a young Latino actor.
Ant-Man?
Yeah, are you talking about John Leguizamo, right? His sidekick, the guy that runs the security business with him?
That's not John Leguizamo.
Or Michael Pena, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But either way, but Michael Pena, he's in his isn't he late 30s, early 40s?
I don't know.
I feel like for a Zorro part, I mean, Banderas had to be in his late 20s when he did that, right?
That movie.
I thought he was talking about Michael Douglas, so...
Michael Douglas would make a great
the new
Zorro.
Yeah, Michael Douglas is a fine actor. But, let's see, Michael Pena is 45. Yeah, so an Andy
he's way too old to be Zorro.
Yeah, it's got to be somebody in their 20s.
Why?
To play Zorro?
Yeah, Batman was played by Ben Affleck.
Yeah, but that was an older Batman though.
That was an old.
You know, it was an old Batman. They said it in the movie.
Yeah, have an older Zorro.
Why?
That doesn't make any sense. Why would you have an old Zorro with Django?
Well, I mean, hang on. I'm okay. So if it's set later on, not with the original Zorro series, like the original Zorro storyline, sure, that makes sense. But I thought we were talking about a remake of Zorro, like a remake of the entire, like a reboot from the Antonio Banderas series from the 90s.
No, Django and Zorro is a completely different thing, Johnny. It's not a reboot.
No, I know. I know that Django and Zorro. You asked me earlier who could play the I thought you said who could play the new Zorro in a reboot. And
according to the IMDb, Nick, it is the Zorro from the '98 movie, though.
Oh shit!
Yeah, it'd be Antonio Banderas reprising that role in a Tarantino film.
So they have to de-age him 30 years?
No, he'd be older.
Oh, so he's supposed to be an older version of that Zorro character. Yeah. Okay. Why are they doing this?
It's
why
Quentin.
would you ever want to do that?
Huh.
It's Quentin Tarantino. I don't know.
I mean, I'll certainly watch it.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm just curious why they're doing it.
Boots with Zorro, it would make a lot of sense.
No, Nick. No one wants to see him do Puss in Boots. And nobody wants to see a Shrek, 5 or 6? I don't even know how many they've done now at this point.
It's not Shrek 5, Johnny. It's a Puss in Boots movie.
It's Puss in Boots 16.
Care. I don't want to see Puss in Boots.
The Last Wish.
The last puss.
The last puss you'll ever have to boot.
Because the last puss is always the hardest puss, just so you know.
Puss in Boots only has 8 of his 9 lives left, Johnny.
Or could just be Puss in
Boots.
Boots.
Find the last wish to restore his 9 lives.
It's a movie about a guy who gets a big old blister on his foot.
The last puss is the deepest, baby, I know. The last puss is the deepest.
Is this a thing?
Baby, I try to love again, but I know.
Why are you skipping things? Or maybe I'm just wanting to go back and re-sing the chorus with you.
Okay, go ahead, Johnny. Go ahead.
Well, it's too late now. You took the fun out of it.
Damn it.
Yeah. And Neil wasn't singing, so I don't want to sing. We have to do our beautiful harmony. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Don't Give a Flick. I'm your host, Jonny Blackburn. Alongside me this week, as they are every week, are my co-hosts,
Gary Elmore
And Neil Riley.
And this week we are welcoming back to the show the gentleman who never seems to leave us alone, even though we always politely ask him to, with plenty of letters from our company lawyer, the host of the popular podcast, Movies So Bad They're Good, Midnight Cult Classics and Camp, and the Facebook group of the same name, Ian Webb. Ian, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back, and thanks for the key to the studio.
Of course. Yeah. Wait.
Damn it, you gave him the key to the studio?
No, it was probably Neil. Neil's the one who's had the crush on him for such a long time. Anyways, we're popping our friend's cherry today, at least on this podcast. Welcome to the episode, The Man Who Loves Antonio Banderas, and his favorite film is Desperado.
In Boots.
Let's welcome.
No, Puss in Boots.
I didn't introduce you. Shut up.
It's Puss in Boots, Johnny.
Let's welcome Nick Alessandro to the show. Nick, welcome to I Don't Give a Flick.
Yeah. What up, dudes? I'm excited to be on it. Puss in Boots, best movie ever.
Nick, are there any other podcasts that you do?
I mean, every once in a while I do one with my buddy Jonny.
Every once in a while when one
that
of us,
would be a great time to plug that name.
When one of us isn't busy, the other one always is.
You missed the entire Masters season, Nick. Good job.
Oh, I'm so glad I didn't want to talk about golf.
The Masters was really boring this year.
I really didn't want to have to talk about golf for an entire episode. That would have put me to sleep.
Like
the one sport it would have put me to sleep.
I love that they still haven't said the name of the podcast that they're.
Calm your tits down. You won't say in a second. We've got
just keeping the.
We build the suspense.
Yeah,
we build the suspense. That's what Nick and I do on our show. We build the suspense, even though we've only got 3 episodes under our belt.
Anyway, it's called "There's No Crying in Podcast."
We were going to say it at the end.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. This is why we don't invite Neil onto the show, because he just ruins everything.
He's one of the co-hosts.
Not of the sports podcast.
Okay.
I wasn't talking about that one.
Plus, all we would do is talk about the Dolphins.
No,
the animal or the team?
The team.
Oh,
maybe the animal. There's sports that.
But it'd be a waste of time because they are.
Talk about a dolphin. I like talking about dolphins. You don't want to talk about some dolphins?
Flipper. That was a great movie.
Yeah. Speaking of horrible films, Puss in Boots. Let's talk about that. Just kidding. I don't want to.
Today's topic is Puss in Boots.
No, we have limited time, and we have to talk about the second greatest director of all time, the one, the only, the foot fetish man himself, Quentin Tarantino. For those of you that had tuned into our last episode on favorite directors of all time, the directoring, all of us on the panel picked. What'd you say?
I said that they would understand.
Yeah.
Go on. You can ignore me.
Yeah, we all picked.
I feel like I'm not gonna be able to get a full sentence out of this episode.
we all picked Tarantino as our number 2 director.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, which was interesting because we hadn't really discussed that ahead of time. It just kind of shook out that way during the show.
It was pretty crazy. I'm not gonna lie. We had. I think it was Ian going first, and then Neil went after that, and I was like, Gary, if you say who I think you're going to say, I'm going to shit myself. And I didn't do that, obviously, nor would I admit that on live broadcast if I actually did. But you did choose Tarantino, and I did as well. So we're going to be jumping into the meat of Tarantino's films. We're going to go through all of his films chronologically and go ahead and just get over a brief discussion about him, his directing style, just the classic dialogue and the intriguing storylines that he always comes up with, and what sets him apart from the rest. What makes him one of the greatest to ever live on our Mount Rushmore, at least. Let's jump into it really quick. First question up for the day. What makes Tarantino one of the greatest to ever live? If you don't believe he's one of the greatest to ever live, kindly leave, and there will be no problems. So,
kindly leave a comment on whatever forum we're on.
Yes, and
if you're a listener, you can have your own opinion.
Like button.
Yeah, but if you're on this episode, you better agree with us.
Get the
fuck out of here. Neil, what makes Tarantino one of the greatest to ever live?
So as I said on our greatest directors podcast, I think what makes him one of the best is just his use of sound and music. His soundtracks to his movies are always phenomenal. I think that's one of the biggest keys that I like about him.
For sure. Gary.
I would say that for me, it's the way he writes dialogue. I think that he's got really like the sound, as Neil said, is really key, and like his plots are really good. But the way that Tarantino crafts his dialogue is so unique, and it feels so natural. Like, I mean, if you think about any of the scenes from like Pulp Fiction, when they're talking about the Royale with cheese, just as an example, like it's just it flows really well, and I just love how he writes dialogue.
He is a good
Yeah.
storyteller.
He is a good storyteller, and I'm gonna go. I'll break trend. I'll go at the end of this one. Ian.
Well, he's definitely, like he's one of us. He's a huge lover of film, and so he takes all his favorite things about film and he kind of reinvents it and just makes it his own into his own films.
Yeah, he really is a lover of the classics. He really pays tribute and homage to the greats before him, and we'll get into that when we go over each list individually. So I'm excited to see that. Nick, what about you? And I guess we hadn't asked who your favorite directors of all time were, but in general, would you, if you had to pick, would you put Tarantino up there in the top echelon?
Yeah, I mean,
specifically number 2.
Yeah, exactly number 2.
That's
exactly
a requirement.
number 2. Don't tell us number 1 or
Yeah.
anything after 2. But it has to be number 2.
Well, number one's Mike Myers, obviously.
Of course. I mean, who wouldn't love Mike Myers?
Did he direct Austin Powers?
I don't think so. I highly doubt
No,
it.
he didn't.
Okay.
He's on Off Broadway. You have to be a real fan.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sorry about
off
that.
Broadway,
Yeah,
actually, nowadays.
Yeah, everything's off
Everything's
Broadway.
off Broadway now. What do you like about him? What do you like about Tarantino, Nick? What jumps out to you?
Honestly, I think it's the way he combines his like the absolute violence that are a lot of his movies into like a kind of witty, almost humor humor way. I just think that's something special that not many people can do successfully. And so I think that's my favorite part.
Absolutely. He was a groundbreaker and a trailblazer when he came out with Reservoir Dogs in the early 90s there. It really just blew a lot of people away.
Mhm.
Didn't expect to see that. It's rare, and we talked about in our episode last week, movie openings that hooked us immediately. And you look at the opening table scene where they're all sitting around talking. They have the classic Steve Buscemi monologue about how he hates tipping, and it introduces the characters, and you see that obviously in film, but you don't see that type of soft, just kind of mundane opening. It's just very simple. It's great. What I've always loved about Tarantino, and I always get in on this, especially in our what makes a great director segment, is the pacing, and it's the editing. For those of you that don't know, some directors are obviously involved in the editing process. They come out to the weekly meetings or maybe the daily meetings. They'll spend a lot of time with the post-production supervisor and the story producers and segment producers in post-production. But Tarantino, he's either there every single day in their ear micromanaging, or he's doing it himself. In a lot of his films, he's done the editing himself because he I hate to compare him to Jason Garrett, but remember we talked about this, Jason.
That's a sports guy.
That's a sports reference, Nick, you've probably heard of Jason Garrett before. He had
clapping right now.
Yeah, he had always said there were 3 aspects to football. There was offense, defense, and special teams. Tarantino obviously went a different route, but still same philosophy.
I thought that was John Madden.
3 aspects to John Madden might have also said that. Jason Garrett was infamous for saying that in his post-game press conferences.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, maybe John Madden wouldn't surprise me. To win the game, you got to score more points than the opposing team.
Yeah,
Thanks
something
a lot, John.
Jason Garrett could not do.
No, he couldn't stop teams either. Anyways, that's a different topic for a different day
and a different podcast.
Tarantino had said that the 3 elements to film, script writing, production, and then post-production and editing were all equally important. And maybe other directors believe that, but nobody vocalized it as much as him. So the way that the guy can, like we had said, put a story together and paste it perfectly with every example everybody brought up, with the character arcs through his screenplays and the violence and turned into comedy, the way that he throws all of his characters intentions for the end of the film at you in the opening scene, and I'll get into that with Inglourious Bastards with Christoph Waltz's character later. And just everything, it pays homage to the greats and to that decade and what have you. The guy, there's really no weak point for him. I think I'd be hard pressed to find one.
Yeah.
I couldn't give you one sitting here right now. So I did have a kind of a follow up to that though. And if you guys don't have anybody in mind, that's totally okay. But I'm going to ask kind of a broad question on this. Do we ever think there's going to be anybody like him again? And let me clarify. With Tarantino, he's good in so many aspects. He's so versatile out of the gate. He's so well-rounded. And in a lot of directors, you can see glaring flaws. And I'm sure he has a couple, but they're not glaring. Is there anybody right now? Is there anybody coming up that we think is similar to him? Or do we think we'll ever see that again?
Right.
I leave this open to anybody. I'm not going to call on anyone in particular. I will leave this open to anybody.
Well, Robert Rodriguez is pretty similar.
Interesting. Okay. Rodriguez is similar in his style of storytelling and cinematography. I'll agree with you on that. Why do you say that?
Well, I guess how they both came up about the same time, and they worked together on
a lot,
multiple projects, and then they came together for the Grindhouse film. So I say that mostly they have a very similar love of film that came before them, and they both like to reuse that film, their knowledge of film, into their own projects. So so pretty much what I was saying earlier about what makes him great, I could say the same thing about Robert Rodriguez. And their over the top explosive violence. Yeah,
I think that the opportunities to have more Tarantino like directors, maybe not the exact same vein as him, but people who really love movies and have the option or the ability to make a movie, are going to become more prevalent. As we have talked about in previous episodes, smaller, more indie film companies are coming around, things like Blumhouse being an example, where they give the directors much more creative control and the ability for them to take a story. So I think that people that are really influenced by film and understand it are going to have more opportunities in the future to make them, because it's so much easier to make a movie nowadays than it used to be.
Yeah. And I could say somebody else, Troy Duffy. He tries to be like Tarantino.
A lot of people try to emulate him for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of
especially in Boondock Saints. I like the whole thing of Boondock Saints is basically like it seems like a love letter to Tarantino movies.
Right.
And I think that Tarantino is probably aside from any of the directors that do like, the body horror movies and, the torture porn, he's probably like the only violent director left. I mean, in the 80s you had like, movies that had, a lot of, like blood and guts and that kind of thing. But like, if you think about movies that are made today, like, mainly you've got like the Marvel movies that have violence, but it's kind of comic booky violence. But like the actual, like real, like, this looks like actual people getting actually hurt. There's not a lot of those outside of, like the Saw movies and those kind of films.
Yeah. So, I don't know if go ahead, Nick. You haven't talked yet.
I was going to mention Eli Roth.
Yeah.
He's making
torture porn. Yeah.
Borderlands, which it's based off of a video game, Borderlands.
Oh, nice.
It's going to be really violent, because that's kind of like the whole purpose of the game is there's a ton of violence. So I'm excited to see, because, he did like a bunch of shorts and things that are very much like Tarantino, taking off of him. And so I'm excited to see what he does with Borderlands.
He's also, and I don't know if you've seen a lot of his other stuff. He is the epitome of what torture porn directors are. I mean, because he did like Hostel, Green Inferno. I mean, the scene when they eat that guy's tongue I'm still getting chills thinking about it. I mean, anyways, he certainly, he would certainly be up there. And so, I would have to disagree with you on that one, Gary. I see a lot of that happening nowadays. I haven't seen them cut back on the violence at all. Maybe in the big screen movies, I'll agree with you on that one. But if you go and if you watch the stuff that HBO and the Amazon original movies, they're all coming out nowadays.
Right.
Shudder has a bunch of them too. There's a lot that they're not really holding back on the amount of blood and gore. But you're right. I guess when Tarantino was coming out with more mainstream stuff that was hitting theaters once every 2 or 3 years, I guess the mass audience saw that in public more often. Nowadays, it's in the comfort of your own home. So I can see where you're coming from. But yeah, I don't know if that'll ever go away. Ian, it's funny though that you had brought up Boondock Saints, because I was thinking of that and Reindeer Games. Immediately were two that came to mind. It was that same type of, that it's the calm before the storm kind of thing, where everything seems fine and there's not really a ton of suspense buildup, but something's going to happen, and then out of nowhere somebody's head gets blown off, and they kind of like, oh, what happened? It's okay, we're going back to normal, and then yada yada yada. Oh yeah, 5 people were completely eviscerated by an explosion. Back to normal, and so forth. It's that same thing Nick brought up. It's that fun, gory Tarantino style where it combines the comedy and the gore fest element, which we love so much. Hey, we did another episode about that.
Yeah, we did.
Gore fest and explosions.
Yes.
Yeah, you should check that out.
Season 1.
Yeah, this is really just going to be a shout out to all of our previous episodes. This entire one. So let's jump into this. Just from because we got there's not a ton, but he's got a lot of films that we can go in depth on. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with Reservoir Dogs. Okay, and we're only going to be hitting up films that he actually directed. For many of you know, he did guest directing for movie. He did guest directing for spots and scenes for they said Sin City earlier. He wrote oh gosh, what am I?
True Romance. Thank you.
Natural
Born Killers. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
God.
There's a ton.
Another creepy one. Jeez, man. Oh God, what was that vampire one he did with George Clooney and him that Robert Rodriguez directed?
Dusk Till Dawn.
Dusk Till Dawn. Thank you, Ian.
That's really good.
Yeah, and that's another fantastic one. And so like we were saying, that's what makes Tarantino so versatile too. Is outside of being a director and an editor, the motherfucker's also a screenwriter, and so he's truly the triple threat. But let's go ahead and jump into Reservoir Dogs. For those of you that have not seen it, this is basically a suspense thriller where actually, you know what? I usually describe the movie. Neil, I know you love Reservoir Dogs. Why don't you give us a synopsis on that one?
I mean, for those who haven't seen it, it's a great movie about a diamond heist, but it's told in a non-chronological order from different viewpoints. And it's a group of guys brought together that don't know each other very well, and the fallout from that.
Yeah, and this one is a classic that you didn't know what was going to come from this guy, because like we had said, he was a trailblazer and he was a kid that just kind of came out of left field, and you didn't know really anything about him beforehand. He pitched this around to a bunch of different directors and producers. Nobody was interested in it. Not a single person gave him any second looks, even when he took it to festivals, when he took the idea to screenwriting festivals. And Harvey Keitel, somehow, I don't remember how it was, but he had a connection to Harvey Keitel, and Harvey Keitel read it and he loved it. And he said, I absolutely have to be a part of this. And so, they went to the producers over there at, I think, did Paramount do it?
Was that United Artists?
It might be UA. Anyways, so they went to the producers over there at United Artists. We'll go with that for now until Gary looks it up. And they were like, okay, well, we're unsure on this because of that same reason. It's too gory. It's too over the top. Everything's too sporadic. There's no rhyme or reason to anything in the story. It's jumping around. As Neil said, it's jumping to the beginning of the story in the middle, and it jumps to the end 20 minutes in, and it's just all over the place. So they took a chance on it, and the budget was about a little over $1 million, honestly. Most of those big names in there that you saw, like Steve Buscemi, Michael Madsen, none of those guys were really large at the time, with the exception of Harvey Keitel. And Keitel even took a bit of a pay cut and ended up making about 3. Ended up getting a pretty big cult following when it came out on VHS. But in fact, Ian, I don't know if you would consider Reservoir Dogs a movie that would be a cult classic that you could, talk about on your podcast at some points. But yeah, it's that small budget that, it was not in theaters that long. But it certainly had its buildup of fan base when word got around, when word of mouth came around, because it came out in 92. So that's really the only way to build it up outside of, newspaper critic reviews. So let's check this one out. Gary, I'm just curious your opinion on Reservoir Dogs. I know it's got one of your absolute favorite scenes in Tarantino's cinematic universe with Michael Madsen and what was the name of the song where he cuts the guy's ear off?
Trying to make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. That one?
Yeah. And I think I can't remember the name of that one. Anyways, so where would you rate this one? Would you say
Stuck
that this
in the middle
is,
with you?
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Where would you say this one rates for you? Is this in the upper echelon? What's your personal opinion on it? Do you think it's one of his weaker ones? Was it a good opening introduction for him to the world? Was it a wonderful entry to a 30-year career, or could it have been better?
Oh, I think Reservoir Dogs was a really strong first entry, because I think that he really started with showing his ability to tell a story in non-linear format very well, that, maintained the audience's interest and kept people guessing, trying to understand, is there a mole in the group? Who is the mole in the group? And then finally, how will that resolve? I think that him starting with the sort of that, as you said, a really mundane scene, them at the diner discussing, whether or not you should tip people, surely was a, when you first see that, you're like, what is this movie? What is happening here? Why am I watching this movie? And then, you just have hard cuts to a spot that's, either before, great, or greatly after, but it's almost never a sequential order that the scene goes in. I think that Reservoir Dogs ended up being a really strong first run for him. And I think that that really helped get him into Pulp Fiction, which is really the first major movie that he had.
Right, and which a lot of people said it was unfortunate that. Well, you know what? I'm jumping ahead of myself. We'll wait for Pulp Fiction. That's going to be a long one. Ian, how about you on Reservoir Dogs? You and I had briefly talked about this one the other day.
I definitely agree that it's definitely a very strong first movie. It was, I guess, more experimental for him.
Sure,
and,
he's still trying to find himself.
Yeah. However, I know that it's usually rated among his best. Usually is everybody's favorite from him. Me, not so much. More of like in the middle with you for me.
Yeah, where's your slide whistle?
I love all of them very much. So it is definitely great. But yeah, definitely a great start. Good experimental film. But probably not his best. But that's just my opinion. I know lots of people think it's his best, and that's fine.
Yeah. I don't know if I've actually ever met anybody that said they thought that was his best. I know a lot of people have. They said they liked it.
I've seen a lot of people say that.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I personally have never met anyone that's done that. So that's interesting. Usually you hear Pulp Fiction, or you hear
among those two.
Django or Inglourious Bastards or something. You usually hear Reservoir Dogs. Neil, what about you?
I'm with Gary. I think it's a very strong film, especially for him coming out of the gate. The fact that he was turned down so many times in order to get this movie made, but he still managed to get, Harvey Keitel, a young Tim Roth, Michael Madsen on board, Steve Buscemi. He put together a very good cast. He had a very strong script. The music in it is great. Just the background dialogue over the radio is amazing. I think it's just a very well put together film. It's one of my favorites. Maybe not my favorite one he's done, but it's definitely one of my top 10 films of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, how about you? What was your first impression the first time you saw it?
So, I think it fits every Tarantino checkbox, right? I think that's a big thing for me, because it's got that huge amount of violence. You think about, all of his references that he has. And then you've got that like crazy nonlinear story that he always, like, it seems like every one of his movies is like that almost, to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it just hit, like, I don't know, it is him in his first movie. And I liked that.
Yeah. It's almost funny. Ian, you had said that it was experimental. It was almost like he was trying to find himself. It was almost like this was potentially the most organic movie he had ever come out with, because he had never received the amount of money to do something this large before. If you look at it, just looking at his list, I don't know. I didn't really see as much of him necessarily paying homage as much as he did in his other films, and maybe that was because it was his first. Sorry, Ian, it sounded like you were going to have a comment there.
Yeah, he actually started out doing My Best Friend's Wedding, which he filmed part of until it got set in a fire, which was very different, and which I know that because My Best Friend's Wedding is true romance. So
right.
If you compare that True Romance to Reservoir Dogs, they're very different from each other. So it's like he was working on one thing that unfortunately, got lost in a fire. So he completely scrapped it and did something completely different.
Yeah.
Which,
I thought you were talking about the Julia Roberts movie, My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yeah, for a second I was too.
What?
I was like, wow, really? I was like, he really changed gears there midway through, didn't he?
But no, that's yeah. I believe it's called My Best Friend's Wedding.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. It might be the same title. Huh. I never thought about that before, but yeah, it's My Best Friend's Wedding, and which was
True Romance. Right. I had heard that. I do remember reading that story on one of the articles. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people like about it, is because it's almost the true essence of Tarantino. It obviously it sets up the smaller points of where all of his directing style, where it comes from originally, where it stems from, where you see that the comedy and horror, the nonlinear storylines, because that's just classic him all the time. The really witty dialogue, the in your face, very, very long close up shots, like those, God, dude. What was the guy that did the spaghetti westerns? That was he was the Clint Eastwood. Did Clint Eastwood's first couple films? Sergio Leone. Thank you. I want to say Sierra Leone for a second. He was stealing that idea, and in a Spielberg in a sense too, almost. But where he just does those long stares, and a character delivers one entire monologue, 2-3 paragraphs, with just a close-up on their fucking face. Yeah. And it doesn't move. It doesn't change to anybody. If you look at all of his films, that's in there at least once. Every film that he's ever done. Anywho, so let's move on. That very well may have been his most organic and the least that he paid homage to any other time period, because, it was at the very beginning. So certainly a good note to start off on. Let's jump into probably my personal favorite, at least, Pulp Fiction, which was his next one coming up. And I'm going to let Gary take this one with the quick synopsis on that. Gary?
So Pulp Fiction is basically several different stories. I think it's 4 storylines that intertwine at various parts. You've got the pugilist with Bruce Willis. You've got the 2 assassins with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson. You've got the mafia guy who's trying to get his soul laundered. Yes. Yeah. So I mean, and they all intertwine at various parts. And it's just, again, much like Reservoir Dogs, the dialogue on it, I think for me is my favorite, because it seems really, really natural and really tells the characters very well. Basically, and it all kind of comes together at the end, and you have a very interesting scene with a gimp and people trying to get out of a rough situation. It's a real pain in the ass, but they do in the end, so that's good. It's a happy ending.
Yeah, when I think of fairy tale storybook endings, I think of Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, absolutely,
all the time. That's the first one that pops into my head, for sure. Ian, what was your first reaction when you saw Pulp Fiction? Where does this rank on your hierarchy of Tarantino films?
Yeah, it's definitely way high up. I'm not sure if it's number one or not, but it's definitely way up there. But my impression, I was 16 when I first saw this movie, so it changed my life basically. You know, like I went from seeing.
Wow, what a statement! It changed your life, Jesus! Please elaborate. Good God.
Well, you know, at the time when I was like 16, I was watching big like explosion blockbuster movies, and then I discovered this, which is completely different. And it kind of introduced me to this different cinematic world of dialogue and a different sort of violence than I'm used to. And after I saw this movie, like I just started watching other movies. Like I mentioned earlier, Robert Rodriguez. I started watching like his movies, like Desperado, right after that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question. I mean, yeah, it changed my life.
Okay, so would you put that at sweet? Yeah, would you put that at your number one choice then for the Tarantino movies?
I'm really not sure because he has some other really good movies. I think it's probably his. I can't say. I would say his top three.
Okay,
sure.
Top three. All right. Very good. Nick, what about you?
So I really like this movie because it kind of shot some of the, like our well-known actors back into the top. I mean, you think about like Bruce Willis, who had died in Die Hard 2, but then like didn't really do anything for a while until Pulp Fiction. And then he kind of shot right back up. Samuel L. Jackson. There's a lot of really like famous people came out of this movie. And I think
usually John Travolta is listed as like the major
John
comeback
Travolta
story.
Well.
Yeah.
He's usually the biggest. He was usually the biggest one. This certainly took a lot of guys in the middle pack and then really raised them to that A tier.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really like about it is because you can see they put like everything they had into this, and you can see that's kind of what he does to people. Like Tarantino, when he directs people, he gets the best out of them. And I think that's what really makes this movie special.
Okay. So would you put that at the top or the bottom of your echelon or in the middle?
It's definitely the bottom. No, I think it's definitely towards the top. Right?
Okay.
Well, hey, I've met people that have thought Pulp Fiction was one of his weaker films. I never quite got that for myself. But Neil, how about you?
Yeah, they don't talk to me.
Unless I like Puss in Boots.
I think it's a great movie. The fact that after Reservoir Dogs, he was able to get on board with Miramax, which is a very big company at the time. I think he got something like $8 or $9 million to make this movie, and he made that back to opening weekend. I know it made well over $100 million, I think, in its run, but he got such a good cast together. It's such a quotable movie. There's so many scenes that are iconic. People have tried to emulate scenes from this movie. It's just very, very well put together.
Right. Gary.
I would definitely put Pulp Fiction probably as my favorite of Tarantino's films. I think that it's got everything that you want in a Tarantino movie. It's got excitement, drama. It's got violence. Unexpected twists. It's really. It's for me my favorite film of his. It would be interesting to see it in a like a super cut of it where they do it in order, like linear order. See how that feels. I bet that'd be awful.
Don't know. Yeah, I was about to say I don't know if it would have quite the same effect. I don't feel like I would enjoy it fully. But it would certainly be interesting.
The title would like be at the very end. The title credit.
It so weird. It might have to be. For me, up until I had seen two movies that I'll bring up here in a bit, towards the tail end of the 2000s, early 2010s, this was my favorite Tarantino movie, hands down, by far. As great as all the other action scenes are, and as wonderful as, you know, the Kill Bills and Jackie Brown have some really interesting and simple but also complex scenes in them that make them stand out. The movies as a whole, they just didn't have quite the same draw that Pulp Fiction did. And Pulp Fiction, and you've heard me talk about this before, Gary has at least. You know, I obviously always harp on When Dances with Wolves won Best Picture over Goodfellas, but my other big one was when Forrest Gump won Best Picture and pretty much every other award that Oscar season over Pulp Fiction. And I do love Forrest Gump, don't get me wrong. That's right. You know, Robert Zemeckis is a fantastic director between that and the Back to the Future series. Guy's he's an American treasure. But I mean, Pulp Fiction, that was the sign when the American indie film scene had finally come to play. And now look at where we're at. Is there even an American indie film scene anymore?
Is there any film scene? But honestly, all joking aside, is there anything, like, you've got big blockbusters like Marvel, but isn't every movie that comes out nowadays, doesn't it seem like it's indie? Like, they're all kind of made the same way now. We talked about the death of the A-listers. Right. That was one thing back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, and pre 70s, so forth, that made a blockbuster, you know, that signified old Hollywood. You know, and at the Oscars that year, I mean, it introduced the brash new voice of Tarantino, and I mean, essentially his sheer joy in the kinetic possibilities of all that cinema had to offer. You know, from Travolta's dancing and you know, Bruce Willis going medieval with the samurai sword, right? Just you know, Dale dropping the machine gun, the guitar, and he licks on the soundtrack. God, it's just, oh man, I just love it so much. But at the time when this came up in an interview, the president of the Academy had stated that they were looking for something more traditional, even though it had done well at the box office, even though the younger crowd was really loving it and begging for more Tarantino. The Oscars, they were just like, well, doesn't matter. It's our fucking choice. So it ended up going to Forrest Gump, which I'm still going to say, still one of my favorite movies. Yeah, right. But it signaled the change in Hollywood. So, you know, when we talked about earlier Tarantino being this trailblazer and a game changer, this is when it was truly a game changer. Right. You know, he finally came to play at this point. He took indie films on his back and he brought them to the forefront and said, old Hollywood, your time is up. Move over, bitch. Here we come. There's two tracks at this point, you know, there's two roads to go down. And now look how many, you know, possibilities we have with films nowadays. You know, you have everything from blockbusters to indies to mid-level to movies so bad they're good that is now getting to be a bigger thing. It's not just midnight showings. There's actually, you know, so yeah, whole groups and streaming channels dedicated to them. Exactly. You know, Quibi was the thing for a bit, right? That was on for a little bit. That didn't do very well, but whatever, you know, it still had fun, I guess. I never watched it at all. So yeah, you know, for me, also what makes a memorable movie is the amount of quotable lines, the amount of scenes that you recall and you can talk about over and over again. A friend of ours, dad, had one time told us that 80% of males' conversations are based off movie quotes. And now obviously that's an exaggeration, but if we kind of go back and look at all of our conversations with each other, how often do we quote movies? Very often, you know, all the time, or TV shows or whatever, you know, our old inside jokes. Anywho, so yeah, this one is probably at the top for me just because of what it did for the landscape of cinema at the time in the mid 90s. So it's certainly a transition that we haven't looked back on, and it's, you know, it hasn't changed. It's continued to gain traction over the years and keeps getting bigger and bigger. So let's move on there to Jackie Brown really quick. Ian, I know how much you love Jackie Brown, and I'm not as big of a fan of it as you, but please, if you want to give our listeners a quick synopsis on the movie.
Sure. Well, you mentioned earlier about how Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction weren't really him paying that homage to the movies that he loved growing up. Well, Jackie Brown is
Pulp Fiction was, but yeah, not Reservoir Dogs. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Jackie Brown is definitely like kind of a love letter to the older 70s kind of blaxploitation flicks, particularly by director Jack Hill, who did Coffee and Foxy Brown, which I know you've heard me talk about on this podcast many times.
Yes.
This is the big one, mostly because he brought Pam Grier back, who wasn't very relevant anymore at that time, and he just brought her back. Like this is also the only movie that was not an original script by him. This is actually based off of a book. I forgot the name of the book, but he changed the book to Jackie Brown as to pay homage to Foxy Brown, which is an old Jack Hill, Pam Grier flick. And so basically this has a lot of those old blaxploitation kind of homages to it. Like it's got the soundtrack, the old 70s soul soundtrack to it. So I think it's definitely a very underrated film too. So I guess let me tell you why I enjoy it so much. With movies like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and Django Unchained, and especially Kill Bill, a lot of it is him just throwing out little neat tricks that he can do, like kind of look what I can do with like zoom in and soundtrack and stuff like that. That's what makes those movies so great. I mean, that's a big part of it. Not all of that makes them great, but that's a big part of like his little neat tricks that he pulls out of the hat. Jackie Brown is one of the movies where he did not do that at all, and it's still a phenomenal movie. So so it's definitely different from all of his other films, but it's still like really good. Great cast. I mean, first time I saw it, I didn't even realize that was Robert De Niro.
Yeah. Hard to notice off the bat, right? Another versatile dude. Top 10
basically, he brought these old actors back who weren't relevant anymore. Other than Pam Grier, it was also Robert Forster, and Sid Haig makes a cameo appearance, and he just I'd say it's got Pam Grier's best performance of her entire career is in this movie. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right, that's quite the claim, even though you very well may be right. This is one that I know when I talk to people about Tarantino films, this isn't one that comes up on the list of A, one of his best, or B, that people have seen a lot. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, that not a lot of people have seen this one as much? Because it's not like it was his very, very first one that came out. It came out in 97. It followed the success of Pulp Fiction 2 years later. And it was it was the only script that Tarantino ever adapted,
so it
already had a following.
That probably answers your question right there, is that it's not an original script by him.
But I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know if enough people would have known that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it really went under the radar.
It definitely flew under the radar. It definitely flew under the radar because it is such a different film for him. Sure. It's a very slow film for him. Mm-hmm. It's one of his few ones that is linear. There's not a lot of flashbacks. It's not jumping from scene to scene, and the fact that it mainly just follows one character as opposed to 9 people's lives being intertwined together.
Well, I mean, it does kind of. It does follow multiple people. Like Sam Jackson has his own narrative, and then Pam Grier has hers, and then Robert Forster has his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but more so.
I would agree. It's not as fast paced for sure. Yeah, it certainly does have a slower tone to it for sure.
Like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have all those neat tricks that he's really famous for doing, like like extreme like zoom ups, and it does have an amazing soundtrack though.
It does. Oh my god! I mean, if you're a fan of funk music, I mean, this is. I don't know if there's another movie that you could listen to that would, make you bob your head more. Honestly, So Neil, what did you think about it? Because I don't think I've ever talked to you about Jackie Brown before, but what was your initial impression when you first saw
So the
it?
first time I watched Jackie Brown was actually a movie my mother showed me because she knew I was a fan of Quentin Tarantino, and I watched it and I was like, "This is crap! Like, why did I just waste my time with this movie?" Yeah, because I was expecting a different Tarantino film. I was also younger, but I wrote back and watched it probably like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's such an underrated film. You know, it's so good. Like everything else I've said about all of his films, he puts together an amazing cast, and the soundtrack just goes with it so well. It is probably now one of my favorite films of his. But yeah, it's definitely one that flew under the radar for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the same for me too. You know, I mean, I hadn't seen that. I had watched it. I think I was 18 when I watched it. I remember I was with some buddies in Waco, and I was really stoned, and so I didn't honestly remember much of it. You know, I was just high out of my gourd, and so I watched it again about 2 years ago, I guess. And yeah, it's the same thing. It's the kind of that same thing. You know, when you watch a movie as a teenager or as a really young adult, you don't fully understand or appreciate the idiosyncrasies of the film and the subtleties that make it truly special. And then, you know, the older you get and the more references you learn about within pop culture that have, you know, significance to the movie, then you appreciate it when you actually see it. So yeah, I would totally agree. I still wouldn't say it's one of my top 3 of his, but I would definitely say it went from the bottom of my list more towards the middle. But I mean, I for the most part like all of his films, so it's a pretty high bar every single time he comes out with something. Gary, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the movies of his that I've seen the least, and I think that just people don't. I think if you haven't seen it recently, you should go back and watch it because it's really a well done movie that's a lot of fun, and it for whatever reason it didn't get the accolades that I think some of his other movies did, and that they, you know, it does deserve, because, you know, the story is, you know, as Neil said, it's more linear than pretty much all of his other movies, but it's still very good and quite enjoyable.
Right. So Ian, I just wanted, before we move on to Kill Bill, I wanted to ask, is this your favorite Tarantino movie?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a tie between this and Pulp Fiction. I can't really say which one I like better because, I really can't make up my mind. But yeah, they're definitely both tied.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's hard, you know. It's like when someone asks, it's like, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite flavor ice cream? Yeah, typically for most people, it's a hard decision. You usually have a couple of favorites. So we move past that, and then once, you know, Pulp Fiction, we kind of start to see him kind of paying some homage, a little bit of homage to some of the greats. Not really though. And like you said, though, once we hit Jackie Brown, then we start to see that the flair he has for creating what the greats created before him, and, you know, paying tribute to all of them. You saw the blaxploitation with that, and then he moves into the kung fu films, and he moves into the old Japanese warrior black and white movies. Once we get into Kill Bill, you know, kind of the kung fu western, if you will. So I'm gonna let Nick give a quick synopsis on Kill Bill 1, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to me, the synopsis really is, you know, they wake up, Uma Thurman does, and she wakes up from a coma, right? And the whole point of the movie is a revenge story. She goes off to try to stop the man who ruined her wedding. That's Kill Bill 1, honestly.
And there you go. And short and sweet. And so Nick, we'll start with you on this one. Where does Kill Bill Volume 1, at least, where does that fall on your spectrum of your favorite Tarantino films? What was your initial impression when you first saw it? What stands out with this one compared to the rest for you?
Yeah, I mean, this one in particular, I like the swordplay. I'm a big fan of like this, like they did the samurai, you know, you've got katanas going left and right, and then you've got blood everywhere. I love that. One of my favorite scenes when she's fighting, the Yakuza, and you just see, the blood slowly fill the room. It's just, but it's all beautifully well done. Camera angles. It's definitely in my top 3, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was one of the first times actually that I had noticed Tarantino's and we had color palette. And we had talked about this and with some other directors how we really enjoyed, like David Fincher had a really good eye for those color palettes, and maybe it was the production designer they used, but you're only as strong as the team you put around you. This was the first, because all of his other films, it was all kind of, I don't know. It was just kind of all dark, and it seemed like they used pastels for the most part, and nothing popped really for me. But in Kill Bill, every scene was unique in its own way. Every scene was different from the other. It was either bright neon yellows and greens, or it was crisp whites, or whatever they tried to use. It was fantastic. It was, I don't want to say breathtaking, it didn't actually literally take my breath away, but that was something that we finally start to see him evolve a little bit as a filmmaker and move outside of. Sorry, go ahead.
You're telling me that Lucy Liu scene didn't take your breath away when they're out in the snow fighting?
Of course it did. Of course it.
So
that was
beautiful.
It was beautiful. I guess color palettes in movies don't take my breath away, literally. Personally, I would say that personally, I've never had my breath. I've never just gone and stopped breathing for like 3 to 5 seconds because of a color palette I saw in a film. I appreciate
sleep apnea after I saw that scene.
Do you?
Yeah.
You just yeah. I'm just it's like smoking meth. When you see a color palette that blows your mind away, you can't sleep for 36 hours.
36 hours. I was up after I saw that.
Yeah.
And the blood trickling down onto the snow. Man, couldn't sleep.
You're just on Google researching color palettes and the greatest production designers of all time and why Tarantino chose the one he did. That would be insane. Let me know if you ever do that though, because I would love to do a quick short doc on that. But no, man, absolutely. I had never really seen Uma Thurman in anything outside of Pulp Fiction. The only other thing I had seen her in was Batman and Robin, where she played Poison Ivy. So when I saw her, that's a horrible movie, but it's entertaining. When I saw her name up on the poster. You post that A-lister up there front and center, and it draws the audience in. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, who the hell is Uma Thurman? So I remember going back and researching. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah. All right, that's Poison Ivy from Batman and Robin. All right, she's hot. But this movie's going to suck. This movie's going to blow because Batman and Robin sucked.
Yeah. Imagine if she played that movie, but as her Poison Ivy character, all overacting and goofy.
It certainly wouldn't have had the gravitas of a seasoned warrior, for sure. But yeah, this one, it's certainly, it's a stylish and visually striking film, but it's super violent, and God, man, I don't know. Is this the most violent of Tarantino's films? They're all pretty damn gory, but is this the most violent? Is this one the most brashly in your face?
Hateful Eight might beat it.
I don't know. Glorious Bastards is pretty
Glorious
fucking.
Bastards, that Hitler
Glorious
scene.
Bastards is pretty fucking violent.
That Hitler scene at the end, that was
Django
a
Unchained also.
God, yeah, Django was when he blows that guy's kneecaps out.
I think the problem is he's just got a lot of violence.
He does. That's part of what makes this film so great. Neil, your initial thoughts on Kill Bill Volume 1?
So I was definitely excited when it came out, and I was hoping he was going to continue, because I saw Kill Bill before I ever saw Jackie Brown.
Okay.
And so I was excited to see him continue from Pulp Fiction. So you can definitely tell that he, because I think in Kill Bill he got a $30 million budget. So the production value, I feel like, definitely went up there.
Sure.
From Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, it was kind of more of a low budget guerrilla kind of a shooting. And then come Kill Bill, he's actually got, lighting and bigger sets. So I was very, very pleased with the set design and all that stuff. But it was just, it was an entertaining story watching the bride cut her way through some of these other assassins, and it's just a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a jump in overall grossing. They spent $30 million on the movie, and it ended up making over $180 million at the box office, not counting what the DVD sales later on. I'm glad Tarantino never fizzled out. I'm glad that his films continue just over time. It continuously, he grossed more and more on every film. Gary, your thoughts on it?
Well, I think Kill Bill is the height of Tarantino, probably the high watermark of his career so far.
Really?
Yeah, I think that
interesting. Please explain.
Well, I think the Kill Bill story is just so well done, and it's so unbelievably like Tarantino-esque. I mean, it really has his voice strongly in it. The way that he paces it, the way that he cuts around in time, the way that he kind of leads you along with the story that you have to kind of follow and find out, and just the references to the old world, and then the cheap cheese, like when she goes to train with the master up in the hills.
I love that.
Yeah,
that 20-minute. Yeah,
it's like a 20-minute digression from the story, but he goes with it, and it's also filmed in like a really grainy kind of a style that matches sort of those old 1970s kung fu movies. Like I think I think Kill Bill is the most intensive story that he has, and it's just so well told as it moves from point to point. So to me, I think that's his masterpiece, even though Pulp Fiction is my favorite.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I would, with all the love you just gave it, I thought you were gonna say that it was your favorite in general. But okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, really quick. So Pulp Fiction is your favorite, but you thought his masterpiece was Kill Bill. Why don't you think Pulp Fiction is his masterpiece?
I think in Pulp Fiction he was still refining how he was doing things.
Okay.
I think that with Kill Bill, he didn't have to limit himself in any way. Like he had pretty much an unlimited budget to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that he was able to get bigger sets, like do like a scene of 88 people fighting with swords in a room, and just be as violent and bloody as he wanted. And I just think that Kill Bill was the culmination of both his enthusiasm, his skill level maturing,
sure,
his story inside him that he needed to tell, and his capabilities to tell that story.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, was anybody ever a fan of, I mean, they pay, and so we're going to talk about this obviously throughout the episode. He pays homage to certain directors and styles of movie. This one was a combo of like the old Japanese warrior sagas and the kung fu movies. Has anybody ever seen Seven Samurai?
Yeah.
For the most, just scary. Okay. Akira Kurosawa was the original director of that, and that I guess would be what I would always consider to be the quintessential Japanese warrior film itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess I only ever watched Seven Samurai and a few other films similar to it because of Kill Bill. I was just interested. I was like, okay. I wonder why he decided to create this. And then I go research. I'm like, Kurosawa was one of his inspirations. Like that was one of his favorite directors when he was, thinking about going to film school. And then obviously, it never fucking went.
Right. Yeah.
And what I loved about it was the part when they would speak Japanese, then they would go ahead and pay homage to those old kung fu movies where they were badly dubbed, and that the ADR the ADR was like, it was always, you know what I'm talking about? Like the English, they would speak really fast and it would never match up with the lip syncing.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have that in the scene where she goes to train with the master in particular. When the master talks, it moves too fast. And I never read anything like if he did that intentionally. I would assume it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that small stuff that's just so creative, and that attention to detail that makes me appreciate him as a director more. So I would still, if we had more time, argue with you that it's not his masterpiece, but it certainly is one of his best, just due to that fact.
Yeah.
Loved it in general. Ian, I don't think I asked you your opinion on this one, right? I think you were the last one.
Well, first, real quick, are we talking about both of them together or just the first one?
Just
that
the
was the
first one.
combining. Because when you guys talk about the master is actually in the second Kill Bill. He's not in the first.
Oh, okay.
I kind of consider it just one movie because it's
consider it one movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one long movie.
Yeah, Tarantino himself considers it one movie too.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we'll combine both of them. We'll combine both. Ian, why don't you go ahead and just give us your opinion on both?
Yeah. Well, I have to give you my original opinion. Like, I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
I think
give us your original.
I was in high school when the first one, or I guess they both came out like the same year. So I was in high school when they came out. I had already seen Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, not Reservoir Dogs, but I'd seen Dusk Till Dawn, and so I was a big Tarantino fan. And then it came out, and I remember really enjoying it, but I wasn't really big on kung fu movies, so I kind of slept on it, and then I forgot about it for like a long time. And then for some reason, it was like, even though I'd seen it, I kind of forgot about a lot of it, and I slept on it for a long time, and it was actually kind of rated low on my list until I recently saw both of them back to back at Alamo Drafthouse. So again on big theater. I don't know how many years later, like 15 years later, probably. And it was just like, I was so amazed by it. So like I felt bad for rating it so low for so long. And I'm just like, yeah, this is an incredible film. Like all the shots, each, like you were saying, each scene is different from each other. And I think it's got probably the best camera angles out of all his films too.
Yeah, I think it has I think cinematography wise, I think between that and Django Unchained, I'd say they're probably at the top of my list for the two highest res ones for sure. So really, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so really quick, I do want to know for all you guys, and it's probably been about 13, 14 years, I think, since I've seen either one of them. You watch them a lot in high school when you're kind of like into that, maybe early 20s, and then you kind of move on. So yeah, I guess, they kind of ran together. What did you guys like better, one or two? Quick answer. Neil.
2.
Nick.
Can I cheat and say the last part of 1 going into 2?
Sure, that's fine. Why not?
Okay.
So 0.5 to 1.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Ian.
It used to be 2, but now it's 1.
Okay. Mine would be 2. Gary.
2.
Okay. So yeah. I mean, it's certainly it was certainly a time that we saw him finally. He finally evolved into. It's always nice to see a director evolve into another aspect of cinema. Once the great ones are the ones that master something and then move on to something else to master it. He had already mastered the portion of dialogue and, like we talked about, the chaotic nonlinear storylines. And then now he moved on to the visual aesthetic of it all and really started to perfect that, as well as his action scenes. Because if you look at, you have the kind of gunfights, I guess, in Pulp Fiction and
they're all,
all that.
Realistic, whereas in Kill Bill it's
it's very whimsical. Yeah, exactly. It's very fantastical. It's certainly not. It's certainly not. I would definitely say it's the most just fantasy based.
And that's what I mean when I say like he does a really good job of keeping the flavor of each of his movies very different. Sure. Because like Reservoir Dogs is a very serious movie. Yeah.
Built around a lot of tension and suspense.
Yeah. And then like Kill Bill is it's also a serious movie, but it's also very fantastical in the like levels of violence and things like that.
Right.
So and he does a really good job of being able to tell a story in both modes.
It's the first time that we had actually seen him kind of go over the top with the comedy aspect. It became kind of campy at points, you know, where and I talk about like the dubbing or the lip syncing. You know, at points it did get a little over the top with, it wasn't farcical or anything, but it was nice to see him add little elements like that in there for sure. So let's go ahead and for time strains, let's go ahead and move on to Grindhouse Death Proof. So I'm going to throw this one up there. This one, honestly, this is the one I know the least about. I've only seen it once and I barely remember it.
And it was the one filmed in Austin.
Yeah, and it was, sure thanks to Robert Rodriguez. So I'm going to throw this one up to a Hail Mary. Does anybody want to take the synopsis on this one that remembers the majority of it?
I guess I'll take it.
Go ahead,
if you don't mind. Since
go ahead.
you know, my podcast, you know, is kind of this whole area, you know, the midnight portion of the maybe so bad or good midnight cult classics camp. The midnight portion is another word for a midnight movie is grindhouse.
Right.
So this movie is paying homage to one that was really dear to my heart, the Grindhouse movies, which, you know, the midnight movies, the ones that Quentin and Robert Rodriguez were kids watching that got them into film, all the fun, like over the top, gory movies, or the blaxploitation movies. Those are also considered Grindhouse. However, I think that this is his more kind of phoned in movie in a way. Like, I don't think that he put as much effort into it as he did with his other films. So it was just kind of something that they just did for fun and didn't really like I said, put as much effort into it. So
Well, for those of us that haven't seen it, what's it about?
Okay, what's it about is it's basically there's this crazy stuntman Mike, I believe his name, and he's a serial killer, and he's going around just killing women he's attracted to, and or women who have attractive feet.
Wonder why I chose that.
Yeah, right. And that's about it. So yeah, it's kind of a rush story. That's really it. Half the movie is a car chase, which is great. I mean, I love car chases, but I don't know. For me, it didn't really do it for me. Sure. That's really the best I can say. It's a car chase serial killer that pays an homage to old Grindhouse midnight movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hey, like you said, it falls perfectly into our group's niche. That's for sure. Neil, what was your initial impression when you saw Death Proof? I'd have to say this is probably. I'll let you tell us what you think first.
So I was a little underwhelmed by it. I agree with Ian. It does seem kind of phoned in because it was made to be a double feature with I can't think of the other. Planet Terror. Yeah. Which to me, I thought Planet Terror was more entertaining than Death Proof.
It was.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
But it was an interesting story. Like Ian said, this ex stuntman drives around town to town, finds people at a bar. Hey, you want to go ride in my Death Proof car, and gets them killed. It's such a bizarre premise. But the guy does get his comeuppance at the end. I think it was interesting plot wise, but it was just kind of like a so what afterwards.
Yeah. It was certainly one that didn't stay ingrained in your memory very long. It was probably the only Tarantino movie that after I saw it, I didn't talk about it with people the next day. Normally after we all go see a movie together, or there's one that really impacts us to our core. Which for most Tarantino films, I'd say that we can always do that, with the exception of this one, maybe. Is that there's not much to talk about. I mean, granted, like I said, I only saw it that one time, and I remember like 2 or 3 scenes, and that's it. It was just very underwhelming, like Neil said. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Kurt Russell rolling around in a car, killing people. I don't know. It's not my favorite movie, to be honest.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
long.
blame you.
It feels like really long when you watch it. Like, when it's like one of those movies you're like, okay, like I get it. And then it like takes another like 45 minutes.
Right.
That's this movie.
It's like The English Patient, but with car chases and death. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Or just car chases, I guess. There was death in both.
I mean, it's a 2-hour movie and it was an hour 45 minutes too long.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can see one of the car scenes, where he's driving around. I mean, the car was sweet, but like that's it.
Yeah. Like it should have been a great movie, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, no director has had every single one of their films be an instant classic. No director in the history of cinema ever has or ever will do that, unless they come out with just one movie and only one movie, and it's a classic, which that'll probably never happen. Gary, what do you think? Death Proof.
I actually like Death Proof. I'm gonna have to disagree with everybody else on the panel on this one.
It's cold when you're all out there alone, huh?
Yeah, but again, I think that. One of the things Tarantino does very well is he sees what kind of story he wants to tell, and he makes a movie that very much tells that story. So it's kind of it's really the exact opposite of like Marvel or Disney. I guess they're the same thing now, but because when you have like one of those movies, it tries to broaden out and appeal to everybody, and so doing so, it often becomes more shallow. Whereas with Death Proof, it seems like everybody did not really like that movie that much, but I thought it really nailed the type of movie that it was trying to portray. Like one of those old grindhouse pictures that's really violent, realistic, although the story is a little out there. Like Leatherface is realistic, but it's not really something you see too often, thankfully. But I think the story was very interesting and how it portrayed that. And aside from it was kind of neat seeing my hometown Austin portrayed in a film, because like you were like driving down the road and you're like, oh, I know that place, that's on Congress or whatever. It shows like I probably about. To me, the only thing I remember there was a scene in a bar where he meets him, and then the rest of the movie is the chase scene. But I thought that it was an interesting movie, and it fulfilled the function that it set out to fulfill, which to me makes it a successful movie. And I found it enjoyable as well. And Kurt Russell's always a lot of fun. And the lady, I can't remember her name. She's the stunt person.
Zoe Bell.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. Good job, everybody. Good job, panel.
Someone had Google on.
Go ahead, Ian.
Sorry. Speaking of Zoe Bell and also Kurt Russell's characters, Tom and Mike, they're both stunt people, which is brought up again in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where they're both playing stunt people again.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and it was neat to see her because they let her act in that, and then so you could actually see the Zoe's, like when she gets on the hood of the car and trying not to fall off, like that's the actress, like, and so you could see her face, and like it was. I thought that was kind of a neat change. So, I mean, Death Proof, is it his best movie? No, but is it like bad? I wouldn't say so. I'd give it probably like a 6 out of 10.
That's still close to okay.
That's a little bit better.
We talked about this with Hateful Eight, though. It was at one of those points where we had seen Hateful Eight and we were like, okay, this was still a good movie, but compared to his past films, it's on the lower end of the spectrum here, and teach their own. But I think I would have to agree with you guys. I would have to say that he phoned it in. It just kind of seemed like he didn't really want to do it, and he just kind of just went for it, and you had the visual effects, and that was it.
Okay.
Just kind of boring, but teach their own. It was not I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was like a 3. I wouldn't be like, oh, this is Neil Breen level. I wouldn't, like go anywhere close to
0,
that.
negative 15,
-5. Give me my money back.
Yeah, give me a gun to blow my brains out.
Pay me to watch this if you wanted me to watch again. Yeah, it's not there. Absolutely not. Ian, sorry, it sounded like you were going to add something.
I don't remember.
Okay, no problem. So moving on to the one that I'm really interested to hear everybody's opinion on, because it's for some reason it's one that we really don't talk about very much. It's Inglourious Bastards, and I'll take the wheel on this one since I haven't given a synopsis yet. Primarily, it's a revisionist of history film and Tarantino has never done this in one of his movies before, and we talked about before in the best directors, the great ones always try to make they try to keep the same style in small minute parts in pieces in each film, but they always try something different. They always try something innovative in each new film that they do. They always try to mix it up. They never keep it formulaic or anything like that, or try not to at least. And with him, it's that same thing. It really wasn't a war movie, honestly. If you look at it, I mean, it was based during World War II, but the style of it was not a war movie. When we think of war movies, what do we think of? Anybody? Patton, Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket.
Longest Day.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And I don't necessarily mean, because they weren't storming a beach, it wasn't a war movie. I'm saying there was not a greater goal for winning the war as much as there was a greater goal of revenge for the main French girl character, and then the other team in killing Hitler. It was more of a story of revenge than it was a war movie, if that makes sense, for me at least. Anyways, so basically there is Christoph Waltz's character, and this is the first time he graces the mass audience in America and Europe, on a big stage. As the de facto leader of there were a special Gestapo force, essentially, that was trained to hunt and sniff out Jews in hiding. Maybe similar to the people that found Anne Frank. I have no idea. But then there is basically at the beginning of the movie, he kills an entire family at a farmhouse, and one girl gets away. A few years later, we find out that this girl, spoiler alert, has she owns a theater in occupied France, and she was the one that got away, and somehow her path and Christoph Waltz's path cross again. They want to show a movie, I think it was called My Führer or The Great Führer, something like that. But they want to show a movie dedicated to Hitler at her theater, which is this really nice, prestigious one in France. And so she kind of just goes along with it. All the while they're planning on, torching Hitler, killing him with the aid of Brad Pitt and his undercover group of American soldiers that are solely dedicated to finding out these Nazis and killing them one by one, especially the extremist groups. So it's just such a fantastic film. Gary, I want to get your opinion on Inglourious Bastards first, really quick. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think Inglourious Bastards was very well done, as we talked about in, I think it was our last episode, captivating opening scenes.
Right.
The opening of that was really, really well done. There's also a scene when they're the group, the Inglourious Bastards, are trying to pretend to be Nazis to sneak in.
They're pretending to be Italians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
you're talking about in the opening scene when they're going into the theater and it's the premiere of Hitler's movie?
No. When they're in the bar downstairs.
Yeah.
That's and like that's one of the most intense. I guess not intense, but it's one of the most tense, fight scenes because he's trying to order like 3 beers and he uses the wrong hand signal, like he uses an American hand signal as opposed to like a German one, and then it builds very well. I think that whole movie, it was a lot of fun, just because I'm a big fan of fictional histories, like Henry Turtledove, things like that. And it was kind of neat just to see a different approach to that. And I give it a solid mark on that.
Absolutely. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I love it because, while it isn't based on a true group of people, right, it still has that history to it because there were groups of people who fought against the Nazis and took up arms. And so it's kind of like that, right? They assemble a team of Jewish soldiers to get retribution. That's the movie. And so it's really cool. It's got a lot of really great scenes. I talked about this earlier, but killing Hitler in a movie theater. I mean, it's amazing.
We've all wanted to do it. We've all played D&D campaigns where we've attempted to end Hitler's reign and attempted to topple the Third Reich, right?
That's a pretty specific one, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried, but it's. I mean, it might be my favorite movie of his. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Neil, how about you?
I mean, World War II, the 1940s, is probably one of my favorite eras in human history. So I love basically any film set in that time frame. So when Quentin Tarantino was coming out with a World War II film, I was very interested. And when it came out, I thought it was definitely living up to all of the expectations because it was nothing of what I expected. It's such a great movie. It's got such a great story. The scenes are well done. The dialogue is well written. And like you said, Christoph Waltz, he's just such a great actor. But there's so many memorable scenes, and it's probably my second favorite of his.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I feel like the World War II era is a lot of people's favorite. Fun piece of trivia. First two major roles for Christoph Waltz were in Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, both Tarantino films. First time he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, won both. Super cool. Ian, sorry, your thoughts on it?
This is actually much like Kill Bill, one of my more slept on movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've never really had much of a chance to watch this one. I saw it real late, like years after it came out, and then when I did see it, I was really distracted, so I wasn't really able to pay much attention to the dialogue, especially the subtitles. And so I've seen it a couple of times. I did really enjoy it, but I haven't really been as invested into it as much as all the other films. So it's funny we talk about this now because I was actually planning to watch it today. Earlier today, before I even knew we were going to do this, and I didn't get that chance, and I wish I had. But all I can say is I really enjoy it, but I don't remember a lot of it, and I definitely owe it to myself to rewatch it. So I plan to.
Absolutely, yeah, man, absolutely. And for me, the fact that it was able to be a bit of a war movie, a revenge story, and then an homage to war movies. It had just the bits of comedy and drama in it. I think this was up to this, not even up to this date. I'll just say it in general. It was his most ambitious film because what I love about Tarantino, and I said it earlier, was when he writes his script, especially the antagonist, he writes who they are and what their intention is for the end of the film into the dialogue, and then he throws it in your face from the very opening moment that they're on screen. He doesn't, none of his, and you see this with a lot of antagonists, they play coy a little bit. They try to be a little cryptic in how they're speaking about things. They try to, even though you're kind of able to figure out the plan by the end, the well-written villains are the ones that put it out in your face, but still at the same time, they are able to keep their composure and they're still able to keep it hidden. Anyways, you see this in the opening scene where he's talking to the farmer, and before he's even walked into the farmhouse, he knows the Jews are there. And he knows he's going to be able to break this guy down. And there's really nothing this farmer can do about it. It doesn't matter how calculated and intelligent he is. This guy's done his homework. He knows how to sniff out a fake, whatever. Same thing when they go into the premiere. The French girl who owns the theater brings in Brad Pitt, BJ Novak, and I can't remember the name of the other actor, but they're pretending to be like Italian, part of
the waiters.
No, not the waiter. They were, but they were guests of hers. They were supposed to be Italians. Anyways, so none of them really know Italian, and so he speaks like 5-6 languages, Christoph Waltz, and so he walks up and is kind of suspicious, and he's asking each of them their name, and he speaks to them in Italian, and they're like, oh, sí, oh yeah, and he's like, what's your name? And they're like, Alejandro, and he's like, say that one more time, Alejandro. Say it again. He's like, Alejandro. Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure that you could pronounce your own name. So it takes the guy 3 seconds and he figures it out. And maybe I got a bro crush on Christoph Waltz's character.
No, he was very well done in that movie.
It just pays homage to the brilliance that is Tarantino's dialogue and writing style, and it's just fantastic. Nick, I'd have to agree with you. I'd say Inglourious Bastards is my favorite Tarantino film by a hair over Pulp Fiction, and I only just switched that within the last year because I started really I went on down the rabbit hole for YouTube with some of the greatest antagonist and protagonist performances of all time. I came across Christoph Waltz's one, hadn't seen it in a couple years, watched it, and then went back and rewatched Inglourious Bastards like 5 times in the span of 2 weeks just because I got hooked again. I was like, man, I forgot, how good this was. Because it'd been like 10 years since I'd seen it. Anywho, I will quit beating a dead horse. We will move on to Django Unchained, another classic. We'll go ahead and jump into that one. Neil, do you want to go ahead and give the synopsis on Django?
So yes, Django, it's basically a recently freed slave, gets partnered up with a bounty hunter to go and look for a very, very bad man. And in the journey, Jamie Foxx, Django, finds his wife, and a lot of gunfire and explosions happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the first times that we really get to see Leonardo DiCaprio flex his bad guy muscles, his villain muscles, and play something a little different. So that was kind of cool to watch. Love that scene where he's explaining, where he's talking about the size of a slave's brain and the growth compared to the plantation owner's brain or whatever. And he actually, I think probably you've all heard this before. He actually, like, when he breaks the glass, he actually cuts his hand open, and the pain was so intense that he kept yelling. But he's a method actor, so Gary, it goes my saying method actors are better than technical actors because it causes him to give the scene of a lifetime.
I mean,
the scene they used was the scene where he cut his hand open. I'm just saying. Anyway, so that was great. Neil, what were your initial thoughts on Django when you saw it?
So coming off of Inglourious Bastards, Django was definitely to me, kind of over the top, gruesome revenge story, but it was great and it was very well done. It's a very dramatic film with a little bit of comedy spiced in there because there's a very hard break in there when they run into those KKK guys.
Oh yeah,
and there's a scene where they're
Jonah
arguing about the holes cut in the hood, and you're like, "What is going on here?" Like, anyway, besides that, I think it was phenomenal cast. I absolutely love Jamie Foxx. I love Leonardo DiCaprio, Officer Christoph Waltz. Samuel Jackson does a great job in there, but I think it's just a very interesting story, and to see him do a Western was very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, how about you?
I love it. It's just great, all the like front to end, and I think it's one of his best shot films. Like like cinematography, everything. The acting is great. The director's great. The camera angles, everything. I'm not crazy about the soundtrack, like the Tupac mixed in. I'm not crazy about that.
I love that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely, it's got everything. Like I like that the scene near the beginning. Okay, so the introduction scene is kind of like it's like Inglourious Bastards intro, but different. Like it's Christoph Waltz been a completely different character, but just showing how badass he is,
right? With
pretty much with his words.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just like intimidating and just like, but as a completely different character, like complete opposite. And then he goes to the town where the whole thing with the sheriff and the marshal. and he goes from being basically a terrorist to just give me my money, and then he gets out. It's just great. The script is great, the dialogue's great, everything. It's a perfect movie.
Yeah, it. Would you say this is this above Jackie Brown for you?
No, but the three of those are all just definitely like those three are my top three. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Gary, how about you?
Yeah, I think the Django Unchained is a decent movie. It's not my favorite of his. I do like the fight at the end is very interesting. Basically everybody gets killed
Gory
in it.
bloodbath.
Yeah,
that's probably my favorite gun scene out of all of his, as far as gunfights go. Out of all of his movies, I'd say that was probably my favorite one, the final one.
I don't know. In Reservoir Dogs, at the end when they're having that standoff, is pretty.
It's not a gunfight. That's just people getting shot. Like three guys. Like it was like wasn't like it 2 or 3 shots each, and then everybody falls down and dies.
Yeah,
that's not a gunfight.
Well,
that's a bunch of guys.
Steve Buscemi has a very good shootout with the LAPD.
Yeah, unfortunately,
we don't see it
off screen. But yes, you hear it. You hear it.
You can hear it.
But yeah, I think that he did. I think like all of his movies, it's a very well done movie.
Sure.
I think Leonardo DiCaprio did a great job in it, and Jamie Foxx did a great job in it. But yeah, it's not. It'd be top of the mid tier for me.
Interesting. Okay. All right, Nick, how about you?
Well, I really like this one because of it just shows how strong of a director he is. I mean, he literally took a spaghetti western and remade it into our time. Yep. Like that's the coolest part about it. Django was originally a movie from Corbucci, I think is how you pronounce the name, Sergio Corbucci. Mm-hmm. It's an Italian director, and he even used the same opening credits. He's used the same theme song. Like all of it was just a new spaghetti western, and I love it.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you because that's what makes Tarantino. That's what makes him such a rare oddity, because he's able to take all of these old school. We look at Kill Bill. We look at Kill Bill. You look at old samurai movies from the 50s, and then Bruce Lee kung fu movies from the 60s and 70s with the Kill Bill, and then you look at a war movie or the blaxploitation movie or whatever. He can just take that, and then like you said, Nick, he puts a modern twist on it. He adds into the soundtrack, which Ian, unfortunately I do have to disagree with you on that. I loved the remix, the soundtrack that they had in this, where they take those old Western songs and then they throw some new age songs in. You give everybody gets a taste, and that's what I love about all of his movies, with the exception of the last one we'll talk about. But that for me, yeah, this one rounds out my top 3. Inglourious Basterds, Pulp Fiction for me, and then Django. Just because we finally, I feel like in all of his other movies, I got to see an actual fight scene in Kill Bill volumes 1 and 2. I got to see actual fight scenes, which was great, but I didn't really get to see a long shootout where a lot of people died. People die in his movies and in gory ways, but it's not as calculated and focused in on one main hero as it is in Django in that final scene. And that's what I really loved about it. I was glad I was finally able to see that. Maybe it was just a sigh of relief after watching his films for over a decade. It was nice to actually see that portion. But anywho, yes, certainly one. Certainly was my. I do have to say, can we all agree? Maybe Quentin Tarantino, as great of a director and screenwriter as he is, maybe he shouldn't act. Maybe.
I actually really like seeing him in his movies.
I hate seeing him in his movies because he sucks. He's a horrible actor. He's great. No, he's not. He's awful. Do you remember in Django where he tried to do that fucking Australian accent, and I don't even know what dialect that was. It didn't sound like anything. Mm-hmm. It sounded like nothing I'd ever heard.
The only thing that would make Puss in Boots better
was Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah,
as Shrek, he just replaces Mike Myers.
I love how he was the only character in Django that didn't use the N-word.
Yeah, that is interesting too.
Now that I think about it,
yeah, and that's a topic for another day. Just how controversial.
When will he be canceled? When will the mob come for him?
Oh yeah, I mean it's only a matter of time.
That could certainly that could certainly turn into an interesting movie if he decides to do another one past Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He seems to always break the barriers. Could happen. Who knows? Let's move on to, because we're running out of time here. So let's move on to the Hateful Eight really fast. And I'm going to go on ahead, and I'm going to do this one myself. Hateful Eight is essentially, it's another Western. You got Kurt Russell, and he's got one of the most wanted fugitives in America at the time in his control. He's traveling across state lines to get her to be hung. I do forget where it was at, somewhere in Texas, I think.
It's Wyoming. I'm pretty sure it's Wyoming.
It's in Wyoming, but they're traveling there. Yeah, they might have been traveling to Wyoming. So anyway, so they're traveling for her to be hung. Her brother's gang is right behind them. And he ends up stopping at this inn, which is in Wyoming. They get caught up in a blizzard. Basically, just a straight up shout out to John Carpenter's The Thing. Nobody trusts anybody. We find out that all of these people inside of the cabin, along with Kurt Russell's, they all, interconnect and weave together. And, we end up having a bloodbath where essentially nobody survives by the end. I'm not going to give too many spoilers away. The movie's...
Well, you kind of did already, but that's okay,
There's a couple other things at the end I can give out. But Ian, I know that you really like this one, so I'll let you go first. So what did you think? What did you think of the Hateful Eight?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Yeah, here's why. It's a little bit different from all the others. A lot of people don't like it because it's all mostly one scene. I think it really adds to the claustrophobia. Like that, the extreme cold outside, it kind of makes it kind of a very uncomfortable in a tense way, but also enjoyable in the same way. It's kind of like a play. Like it's less of a movie and more of a play.
I was going to say that too. It really reminds me of Agatha Christie, like a murder mystery kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely murder mystery, especially the whole like somebody poisoned the tea.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I laughed out loud in the theater when that happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. Just because it was something new, pretty much. It's very tense. Like I'm just on the edge of my seat the entire time, and then poor Jennifer Jason Leigh just like nonstop, just getting blood all over her the entire. Like they beat the fuck out of her, but which kind of adds to the like that uncomfortableness, but you enjoy it at the same time in a way. It's like kind of, I don't know, it's weird. But also I love the 70 millimeter wide angle. Like that is just amazing. That in the sound or the score by, I forgot his name, but he did the Sergio Leone movies.
Yeah, the wide angle, it really helps, since it's such a big picture you're getting. It really helps, I think, build that sense of isolation. When you have an outdoor shot, and then also build claustrophobia when you have an indoor shot, because you've got so much on the screen, and not like so much on the screen like a George Lucas so much, but like there's just like a lot of things going on, so it makes you feel very tight.
Yeah, and Ennio Morricone was the composer for that. Yeah. For sure.
But yeah, I'll just say one more thing and I'll move on to the next person. I love the opening shot where you see it's all snow and you see like a statue that's being snowed on, and very back you see the horse or the carriage that Kurt Russell's in, and it's so far back, but that wide angle, you see how far away it is, and then it like kind of it gets closer all the way to to where that statue is, and I don't know, I just think that's just an amazing shot, and then we just see Samuel L. Jackson like room for one more, and then the movie starts, and I just really love this movie.
Perfect. Yeah. It seems like we're kind of all over the place on which one is our favorite for sure. Neil, how about you? Where were you at with Hateful Eight?
So I've only seen the Hateful Eight once, and I just didn't get into it. I thought it was really well shot. I love that he brought back Tim Roth and Michael Madison. I always love seeing them. He loves working with them and Samuel Jackson. But I don't know. There was something about it. I don't know if it was just the pacing or but I just never really got into the Hateful Eight.
Sure. Yeah. Gary, how about you?
I think that much like Ian said, it felt like a play, like kind of, just in one location. I thought that that was a really interesting aspect of it. And I think it was, again, just as in Django Unchained, he goes around to a lot of places. In Hateful Eight, it's just really focused on one place. And I think that
it's an isolation piece. That's
yeah,
nice.
it shows Tarantino's range in the kind of movies he's able to make, and I really did like The Hateful Eight. I thought it was really well done, and the ending of it was very interesting as well, because I think it's broken into 5 parts. The movie,
Yeah,
and the first 3 parts are in linear order, which is strange for him, and then part 4 takes place before part 1, and then part 5 is the very end. So I think that was. That was interesting to see that. So I thought it was quite a well done movie.
Yeah, I thought that it was very nice to see him once again go back and kind of coming off the tails of Django with a different style, obviously paying homage to the spaghetti westerns, but at the same time, and Ian, we had talked about this on your podcast when we reviewed The Thing, paying homage to John Carpenter and that very similar style of that isolationist horror mixed with a suspense thriller. It's kind of that same thing. It's who done it. The murder mystery, the clue feeling almost. I am although I like that and appreciate that, and I've said that multiple times. I love Tarantino for doing that. I personally, I agree with Neil. I thought it was way too slow. I love dialogue heavy movies when they're witty and well done. It's not that this wasn't witty and well done. It's just that for a 2.5 hour movie where there's not basically any, if at all, action happening, because there's some, but there's not a ton. It just, it's just kind of stagnant at times, and it just gets really slow. And maybe it was that I saw it. I've seen 2 times I've seen it. It was late at night. Mm-hmm. Maybe if I saw it, if I was, just woke up in the morning or something, I had more energy. I don't know, but
having your morning breakfast with the Hateful Eight.
it became a slog at some point. It seemed like I was just kind of trudging through, and I was like, all right, guys, let's get on to the next thing. If they had shaved off about 30 minutes and cut it down to about 2 hours, I know that probably would have ruined some parts of the film. I know, I get it. But if he was able to do that, I think it would have picked up faster, and I think it would have gotten more critical acclaim too. I think the Oscars would have looked more highly upon it than they did.
If you think that was slow, allow me to introduce you to Zack Schneider and his director's cut of
the
Justice
4 hour
League.
long director's cut of Justice League. Nick, how about you?
The Netflix version is longer.
Yeah, hang on one second. Yeah, Nick, how about you?
I mean, I feel like this movie is just one of those, different strokes for different folks kind of movie. Honestly, a lot of people love that it's like a play. I hated it. I've seen it. Like, everybody's like, oh, it's such a great movie. So I've watched it like 3 or 4 times now. And every time I'm like, oh my God, why am I watching this again? I don't know. I can't get into it. It's forever in the snow. We're in a carriage for like half the damn movie. At least.
It feels like it. Yeah. You don't have to explain it to me. I'm right there with you.
It's like, I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You can still, with a Tarantino film, you appreciate the fact that he's able to check off so many boxes with it. His cinematic checklist, it's always there. It's always full. So let's move on to our final. We are running out of time here. So I do want to go ahead and move on to our final one. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This essentially is, this one's not necessarily it's pretty linear, I would say. It jumps between stories, but it stays in chronological
order. It's more flashbacks, right? It's like, because his stories are big chunks, or it's not like a flashback in like Reservoir Dogs, or
a Pulp Fiction or something like that. Right.
There's a flashback within a flashback,
and so there is. It's Inception essentially. He and Chris Nolan they suck each other's dicks.
Okay,
so shut up, Gary. It's really late and I need coffee. So it's essentially it finally Tarantino goes the other route. He claims this is going to be his last film. Obviously it's not going to be. There's no way. The guy's not even in his mid 60s yet. There's no way he's going to stop. He's going to have plenty more.
He could kill himself. You don't know.
I highly doubt it.
Okay.
He he wants to be the guy that says he doesn't love the Oscars and he doesn't need the accreditation and the statues and all that, but deep down inside he does. I guarantee you he does. And not necessarily because he made this. I've always thought that. But he pays homage to the golden era of Hollywood. To the when talkies had become a big thing and things along that of that nature. So you essentially just see Leonardo DiCaprio is this big movie star. Brad Pitt is his stunt double, and they're just on set basically. And honestly, I'm not excited to tell this fucking synopsis. Ian, why don't you finish it up? I know you like this movie. I'm not going to hide my distaste for this one.
You were doing a good job, Jonny.
I just don't even want to finish it. Ian, go ahead and finish from where I left off.
So yeah, like you said, they're in Hollywood, they're acting. DiCaprio, he's washed up. This is a couple of decades after his heyday, and people are starting to forget who he is. Meanwhile, the Manson family is doing their wacky thing. Doing their Manson family thing that they do, and they're going to kill Sharon Tate, and then they meet what was his name, Rick Dalton, I think.
Yeah, Rick Dalton.
Mm-hmm. And so they go for him, and then they just proceed to get brutally murdered by Brad Pitt. And a hilarious way. I really love that scene. Mm-hmm. So, Jonny, I know you didn't like this movie, and the reason why I know that is because you've mentioned that in every single episode of this podcast.
Well, that's certainly an exaggeration, but I have mentioned it one or two times before.
You bring it up a lot. I will say I like all the other movies better than this movie. However, I still really enjoyed it. It's not the same. It's not as great, but for me, it's still really good. And what I really like about it is the how meta it is. This is basically kind of like at the same time Scorsese made The Irishman, which is both of these movies are both of those directors that pretty much talking about getting old and just basically what their career is like in a metaphor in a movie. And there's so many references to all of Tarantino's other movies in this. Like I mentioned earlier with Death Proof, there was the Zoe Bell and Kurt Russell playing the stunt coordinators. And yeah, so basically you have this old washed up actor who nobody hires anymore until a new up and coming director decides to use them. That's pretty much a metaphor for Tarantino himself bringing back many actors back basically from the grave, like I said earlier, Pam Grier and Robert Forster and who like many others. And so and then other than all the meta-ness, there's also, same thing, great dialogue, great shots, great camera angles. Soundtrack, I guess not so much, but for me, it's another really good movie, just not as much so.
Yeah, I would say for me, I don't really like it as much as most of his other movies. But if you want to just skip the first 2 hours of it and go to the last 10
20
minutes,
yeah. Last fight scene.
That's really all you need.
It kind of does turn into the best movie at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it just flamethrowers and people getting stabbed. It's that's because that's what you were waiting for the whole movie, and it just really it was really a tease. It's not great. So I would put this I would agree with you. I'd put it down on the lower end of my tiers for all of Tarantino's work, probably at the bottom.
Yeah. Neil, what about you? Where would you be at with this one?
All right, buckle up, man. So fucking this movie, I wanted to like so bad, and I absolutely fucking hated it. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes of just crap. Like,
Was it
he
2
got, like,
hours and 40 minutes?
Seemed
it
like
was
a
something
full
like
day.
that. But
Yeah.
this guy got like
It was-
$100 million to basically take a shit on the screen.
Who is he, Meryl Streep?
Besides the
Oh,
fact
you watch
that,
him, Dirty Mouth.
Besides the fact that I love the costuming in this movie,
Mhm.
he did a great job keeping like the 60s costumes and all that. And I do enjoy the fact that he, as he always does, alternate history where Sharon Tate survives. But I hated the Bruce Lee scene. I hated,
Really? Man, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, I did too.
I really
That was,
just
like,
I
one of the only
hated that
scenes I liked.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about I gotta ask, what about the part where like he's shooting the scene and it's like it's all produced and everything is like it's the final copy, and then he forgets his line, and then we remember that it's in a movie and the director comes in and yells cut, and then they go back.
I don't remember that scene. I must have blocked it out because it sucked.
PTSD.
Yeah. Nick, what about you?
I don't know. I liked it. Like, it's obviously his movie that he's trying to win an Oscar for. Kind of like Johnny said, like he doesn't want to, right? Like, I don't know. Like, he wants Best Picture. Like, he does kind of.
Yeah.
You know,
He
He'll never
portrays
say it,
he
but he
portrays
wants
that image for sure, but we know that he wants it. Like
everybody
yeah.
knows it, and this
Yeah.
is kind of like that movie. I feel like it was like he was going for it, and I like it. Like, there's some good scenes in it. I don't think it's like his best movie ever, but I don't think it's a piece of shit on the screen. Like, I think there's worse movies. I think it's pretty good, decent.
Yeah,
7 out of 10.
No, not even.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm about 7 out of 10 as well.
I would,
Yeah, like-
it's hard for him to have a bad. It's hard for him to have a bad movie, and it's the same thing, with Hateful Eight. I still didn't think it was bad. I'd still give it a 6 out of 10, probably 6.5. Still a decent score. But this one, outside of Death Proof, this was by far my least favorite. I just thought that, it just felt like people were driving around for like an hour and a half. Like, do you really, if you go back and look how many driving around scenes they have, just people talking in cars or stopping and looking at each other from a car or picking someone up in a car, there's too many of them. And I don't,
Johnny, believe it or not, people pick each other up and take each other to places
right.
in cars.
But I don't want to see that for an hour and a half on film. I don't want to pay $13 to go watch
Uber,
that.
the movie.
Uber the movie. That's
It's a scene
essentially
to
what it
show
is.
dialogue. Well, I mean, all those curse scenes had some pretty good dialogue.
You know what? Honestly, I feel like his dialogue it's gotten weaker over the last couple of years. I didn't think that it was quite as witty. And here's the thing: I'll give you this. Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio are both very talented actors in their own right individually. I did not think that their comedic timing was as good as everybody claimed it was. I thought they were pretty weak on screen together.
I thought
really
it was good.
I really thought it was weak. I thought their timing
was
was way off, and maybe that's why I found the dialogue to be so drained and just not classic Tarantino, was because it seemed like it was one zinger after one zinger, and that's not Tarantino. Tarantino isn't one-line zingers. It's the slow, intense delivery that his actors normally give in a lot of their movies that gives it that powerful zing. And I felt like it was too fast, like they were trying to be like too comedic almost. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe that's what really. And the majority of the movie is the two of them in all of these scenes together. So maybe that's what the biggest thing for me was. Slow pacing isn't a bad thing, but I thought there was too much of it in the first 2 hours. Same thing that Gary mentioned. He's running all these errands as the stunt double, and we go with him to run these errands. And there were a ton of scenes that didn't need to be in there. Same thing. If you had cut the movie down by 40 minutes to an hour or rewrote, recast it necessarily. But it was just too slow. I didn't like the chemistry between DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. And I'm surprised that I'm saying that, because I like both of them individually. But I just did not like them together in this at all. But the end scene was great. Same thing. Production design. I love this. I love the score. That's all fantastic. But he was trying to, Hollywood loves to love itself. And notice La La Land got a lot of critical acclaim.
Yeah.
I like movie musicals, and Emma Stone was awesome. Ryan Gosling was a disaster, but that got a lot of acclaim because it was paying homage to the golden era of Hollywood, and it was a decent movie. But that was, The Big Short was the best movie that year. But anywho, Hollywood loves to do that. So it felt like he was just really pushing too hard to win that Oscar. So, that's just my opinion on it. I know a lot of people that agree with you guys. So for sure. Absolutely. So we are all out of time, guys, for today. I do want to run by really quick, everybody individually. Don't give a big breakdown because we got to know people got to work in the morning. I do want to hear your top threes really fast. So let's just go down the list. I'll just reiterate mine. I had Inglourious Basterds number 1, Pulp Fiction number 2, Django Unchained number 3. Neil, your top three.
Top three in no particular order is going to be Inglourious Basterds, Pulp Fiction, and Reservoir Dogs.
Okay. All right. Nick, how about you?
I'll do Inglourious Bastard. I'll do the whole Kill Bill series and then Pulp Fiction.
Okay, all right. So you're cheating with 4. I gotcha. I'm kidding.
I always cheat.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
I'm an Astros fan.
Ian, how about you?
So yeah, I got Jackie Brown, Pulp Fiction, and just to spite you haters, I'll put it in Hateful Eight.
That's all right, as long as it's not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We're good. Gary, how about you us out?
Pulp Fiction, the Kill Bill saga, and Inglourious Basterds.
Cool. Right on. Cool. So, I think we can all agree, regardless, even if there's, 1 or 2 Tarantino ones we're not big fans of, the majority of his work is, it makes him a treasure to behold.
That's why he's the second greatest director of all time.
Dude,
clearly.
Behind Scorsese, obviously.
No.
We'll get into that.
Mike Myers.
Behind Mike Myers, who I don't know what he directed. But anyways, we'll get into that in a later episode. Really quick for our recommendations for the week. No synopsis on this one just because of how long we've gone tonight. But let's go ahead and give a quick one from everybody, preferably something Tarantino has somehow worked on, or maybe something that's similar to his style of movie, but it's really up to you. I'm going to start. I just want to throw out there True Romance. If you've never seen it, watch it one time and let me know before the credits roll up if you can guess who Gary Oldman is in that film. It's a lot of fun because you will not recognize him for the first couple of minutes, I promise. It's like Tom Cruise and Tropic Thunder. It takes you once or twice in the movie. Good. I know, right? So Gary, let's jump to you.
Based on Tarantino's work, I'm going to recommend The Ridiculous Six, which is an awful Adam Sandler movie.
Why are you recommending that? I hate you so much.
Because I had to go through it, and I think other people should suffer too. Okay.
That was part of his the five movie contract series he had with Netflix. Oh, that was such a bad movie.
So yeah, Ridiculous Six, Tarantino-esque.
Just for people that know True Romance, Tarantino wrote the screenplay for that, and Ridiculous Six.
Oh,
He did not. Yeah, he wrote the screenplay for True Romance. Ian, what's your recommendation?
4 Rooms. That's a movie that Tarantino did direct that we didn't mention. He directed part of it.
Okay, cool. Right on. Yeah, he had a bit spot directing. Cool.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, not only that, but like he does a 20-minute long monologue, which is amazing.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch
great.
it.
No,
I
it's
can't
great.
watch it because it has a monologue.
It's great, Johnny.
I'm sure to you it is. I'll have to take your word for it. Neil, how about you?
My recommendation will be Jackie Brown. A lot of people slept on it, but I think they should give it a chance. It's a quality movie.
Boom. Nick, how about you?
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Okay. Very nice.
Okay.
Very nice.
Story written by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you get to see
By
his
Robert
wonderful,
Rodriguez.
his amazing acting prowess on full display. Check out Ian's podcast, Movies So Bad They're Good, Midnight Cult Classics in Camp. Some great interviews with Mark from The Room, Greg Sestero, and the writer of The Disaster Artist, for those of you that have seen the James Franco, Seth Rogen film that came out a couple years ago. And some awesome interviews that we had today with, was it George Hardy, and what was the other gentleman's name from Troll 2?
Darren Ewing.
Yeah, so those are fantastic. A lot of fun talking to those guys. And also join the Facebook group of the same name. It's fantastic. And check out, you can find those on Spotify, correct? And most other podcast hosting sites.
Spotify, iTunes, Google, basically any podcast platform.
Perfect. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Glad we got to pop your cherry, man. Ian, always a pleasure. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm Johnny.
I'm Gary.
And I'm Neil.
And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for tuning in to Lead Feather Productions' podcast of I Don't Give a Flick. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. Podcasts are available on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts are hosted. I Don't Give a Flick is hosted and produced by Johnny Blackburn, Gary Elmore, and Neil Riley. Executive producer, Johnny Blackburn. Technical director, editor, and audio mixer, Gary Elmore. I Don't Give a Flick is a Lead Feather production. Copyright Lead Feather Productions 2021.